Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Awesome. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. I've got 20 minutes to be extremely tactical, so I'm going to fly through this stuff, hopefully have some time at the end for some Q&A, and then I'm going to be around for the rest of the day to answer any questions you guys might have on very specific details about the app stores, about what's happening on mobile, a lot of the conversation that we had yesterday throughout the day at this conference. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Lee mentioned a few of these things. Today I am the AVP of product at SimilarWeb. We're a digital competitive intelligence company. What does that mean? We like to measure every website, every app in every country. If you don't use it today, I think it's an absolute must for every marketer, for every product leader, and for anybody trying to figure out how their analytics compare to others in the industry. Your own analytics are extremely important, and hopefully everybody in the room is already doing that, but understanding your growth versus the growth of your industry is just as important. Internally, we like to call that analytics in context. I'm focused on most things mobile at SimilarWeb and also helping developers in the entire ecosystem improve their products, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. Prior to this, I started a company called Quetra where we were doing this specifically just for mobile. I came from Google where I was helping improve search and discovery and really personalize the experience of Google Play. One of my personal passions is trying to convert mobile phones from being a mobile phone to the my phone. I don't say iPhone because that was at Apple and I happen to be at Google. But most apps today have the exact same problem. When you install an app, it's the same generic experience that a new user sees that someone else who might have installed the app also sees. And that is actually one of the biggest problems that apps are facing today. They don't understand the user. And so that's why I started Quetra, to try and help developers understand their users, personalize their application so that the users could get the point right away. And we'll talk about that as well. So I want to start off and discuss some of the problems that I hear over and over again as developers saying, these are the things that I need to solve. Of course, every single one of the developers that I've ever spoken to says, I need more users, I need more distribution. How many of you guys in here would say that? Just a handful. The rest of you are very happy. This is amazing. But when it comes to distribution, I like to think about it in two separate halves. The first is getting started, and the second one is scaling. So when you're thinking about getting started with distribution, you have to think about choosing the right sources of users and also trying to get the right user. And most of us don't think about this. Naturally, we look at the number of installs. That metric is so ingrained in us that we're all trying to get to the 1 million installs, the 5 million installs, the 10 million installs. But early in the life cycle of any app, what's important is getting the right users, those that use the app and give us feedback explicitly or implicitly. And implicit feedback is just not doing the actions that we as product managers and developers are building out for. And a mistake that a lot of us make, and this is just because of the way the advertising industry is today, is try to go for the cheapest installs, which tend to be incentivized installs. And those are the worst kinds of users that you can get early in the life cycle of a company for so many different reasons. The first one being those users will never use your app. They're installing your app for all the wrong reasons. They will not give you any feedback. And as I'll talk in a few slides, they'll actually hurt your ranking, which will hurt your growth on a go-forward basis. Once you do get some amount of growth, you start facing a whole new set of problems. At this point, there's fewer sources of data. So if you have 60% of a given geographic market, well, there aren't that many sources of more users to go from 60 to 80 to 100% penetration. The second thing is, often at that point, you're focused on sometimes getting users that you had gotten in the past, but they left you because they didn't get it or the experience wasn't good. Quick survey, how many people in here use Snapchat? Okay, about a third of the room. From the rest of you guys, how many of you think Snapchat is something for younger people that really doesn't apply to you? Okay, great. That's actually a huge number of people. Now, Snapchat has about 100 million users today, and over the next few years, they're going to try to become the next big social network. They're going to try to get all of you guys that might have tried it. But in the back of your head, there is this predisposition that it's an app for the younger generation that I don't really get. Now put yourself in that seat and think about how you have to overcome that predisposition that so many of your users have. So when you're in the growth stage, those are the kinds of biases that you have to get over in addition to just making a kick-ass product. The next problem that I want to discuss is retention. And this is something that most of Quattro was really based on. If you're an app developer that is successful at acquiring the users, the thing you will notice right away is that your retention chart looks like something on the left over here. Have a look at it for a second. Turns out the average Android app loses 77% of its users in the first 3 days. It's a pretty scary number. You spend all this time, all this money to develop your app, and then a lot of money to market your app, build the brand, only to lose almost 80% of your users in the first 3 days. Something's clearly not working. The average user has over 120 apps on their phone. Some pre-installed and a whole bunch installed, but they only use 10 to 12 apps on a given day. So you really have to get your importance in their life clear early in their life cycle. And the chart on the right was even more telling to me. Seb just talked about the importance of being the number 1 or 2 player in your industry. The difference between the top apps, which is the top teal line, and the bottom, the average app, which is the red line, is not what happens after day 3. All of those lines are pretty much parallel at that point. The only difference is what percentage of your users you lose in the first 3 days. So if you're an app developer, the biggest bang for buck you can get is to get your users to keep using your app after day 3. Because at that point, they're pretty much going to stay. So how do you do that? We're going to talk about that as well. The first thing, I look at most things in life like relationships, or in this case, dating. So when you get a new user, the first thing that they're going to have is their first impression of you. Clearly, there was a reason they came and they installed your app. Someone told them about it, or they saw an ad. There was some context in their mind of why they downloaded your app. They have some expectation. So when they open your app for the first time, the challenge is, do you meet that expectation or do you not? Yesterday, Alex from Branch Metrics talked about the context, knowing which ad creative the person came from, or knowing what source of traffic they came from. It's absolutely very critical to give them the experience that they expected. That's one method. Knowing something more about the user is even more interesting. If you knew when the first screen, on the splash screen, that a user was a female who was interested in transportation and is a runner, what could you do as a classifieds company, as a retail company, as an e-commerce company? Probably a lot. And that leads me to the second point, which is once you know the user and you have the user, you have to continue whining and dining. The game doesn't end when you acquire the user. You have to keep enthralling the user, keep hooking them. I think we're going to hear about this later today. How do you build a very addictive cycle of hooks to keep bringing the user back into your app? And that's incredibly important. So you can't just forget the user after the first interaction. And the third problem, which is the very last part of churn in mobile, is a user uninstalling your app. The average user is keeping an app on their phone for 8 months. They might stop using your app after 3 days, but you still have 7 months and 27 days to try and get them back into your app. And so you've got a long period to learn about the user, to get them the right messaging, not overdoing it, but getting them back in. So use that to your advantage. And the few users, or actually a lot of users that uninstall your app, try to understand who they are and why they're uninstalling your app. Because if you can really solve a lot of problems that are there. So do those 3 problems make sense to most people in the room? Awesome. So now let's talk about a few different solutions. I'm going to talk about 4 areas that I think are very interesting. The first is search and discovery, based on my prior experience and a lot of things that I've worked with app developers on. The second one is a new product that we're actually going to be announcing today called SimilarWeb Audience, for all of you to be the first users, hopefully, of. And then I'm going to leave you guys with 2 thoughts. One about Facebook Messenger bots, how they can help your business. And finally, Snapchat. Snapchat's a product that I absolutely love and something that I think every business should be taking advantage of right now in the ecosystem. So let's start with search and discovery. A self-plug. For those of you who want to learn about the basics of ASO, a lot of how Google's algorithms work, I gave a talk at Google I/O a couple of years ago. If you get a chance, go watch it. Watch it on double speed on YouTube. But it has a lot of tidbits that are the very basics of how Google thinks about App Store optimization, how they think about the search algorithms. I'm going to focus on a couple of the ideas from this talk in the next 2 slides, just for those of you who don't get a chance to watch the talk. The first one that almost every app developer wonders is, how do I get on the top charts, the top paid, the top free, the top grossing? And it's actually very straightforward. On a sliding window of 30 days, Google adds up numbers. That's all they do, and then they sort. So for the top paid or top free, in the last 30 days, what are the total number of installs that an app has gotten? And if it's paid, it goes in the top paid. If it's free, it's in top free. There's a little bit of smartness there where you remove the bots, you remove incentivized installs that uninstall it, so uninstalls hurt you there. And in the top grossing, it's by dollars rather than by installs. When it comes to the top new, this is actually a very small detail that is very important. It's from only apps that have been launched in the last 30 days are eligible to be on these lists. And that doesn't mean launched in a given geography. It's launched anywhere in the world. So a lot of app developers, what they'll do is they'll go launch an app in a tiny market to test out the app dynamics and figure things out. And what they realize when they do a full launch is that they're not eligible for the top new lists. So if you want to do some testing, do it on a different package name on Android, a different app package on iOS, because the sliding window starts from the day you launch. The next thing is for search. Everybody knows installs matter, but there's actually a lot more to the search algorithm. I'm just putting this as bullets because they're very important. The first one is not just the absolute number of installs. It's actually the rate of installs that you're getting. So one burst campaign that you do isn't going to get you to win for the next 30 days. Apps that are consistently getting a high number of installs will continue being higher ranked than you. The second one is the number of uninstalls and the uninstall rate as well as a percentage of your installs. So if you keep getting a lot of installs, but those users just churn and uninstall you right away, well, that's not helping you at all, which is why I always say incentivized installs are pretty useless, especially on Google Play, and more so on the App Store as well. And in the last 6 months, both the stores have started focusing on engagement. They've been measuring from the OS level what apps are being used when and how much. And this, of course, is done by category, so they're not expecting every app to get 38 sessions a day like WhatsApp or 20-minute sessions like Netflix. They do it by category and then do relative ranking there as well. Again, another reason why incentivized installs hurt you, because users that come through incentivized campaigns don't tend to use your app. And the last couple are small details, but for minor ranking differences, there's a lot of personalization being put in, especially in Google Play, and they focus on the developer, on the users that have seen positive reviews from similar users. So when you drive reviews, make sure you're getting them in a very diverse manner, because there's a similarity score that's associated in the personalization of the Play Store. And the last two are pretty self-explanatory. All right, when it comes to search, there's 2 parts of search. When you think about search, you should think about the navigational searches where the user knows exactly what they're looking for. So when someone's searching for Angry Birds or Hotel Tonight or OLX, what every store and everybody wants to happen is, let's get out of the user's way. Let's give them what they want and nothing else. So it's really the very clear #1 result. The ones that are more interesting to me, and hopefully to most of you, are the categorical queries. When someone searches for stuff like classifieds or searches for want to sell my bike, hopefully they see let go. And for those queries, there's a lot of the previous metrics that matter. That's the ones you should really be optimizing for. The navigational queries, you're going to get optimized just based on your brand. And both the stores are starting to allow developers to advertise on these categorical queries. Google Play's already done it, and rumor has it that Apple is going to do this soon as well. So that's a good way to know the intent of a user in the mobile app store and get more distribution there. And the last part that I like to talk about from the Google Play perspective that I knew that most people outside tend not to know is how to get on the homepage of these app stores. It's a very soft process, purely based on relationships with the business development teams. Get to know them at the conferences near you. There's local experts throughout the world. But the one thing that almost all companies that get featured tend to do is either do a big launch with an exclusive on one store or put in some kind of API that the stores are trying to promote. So a couple of years ago, when Google thought that they could take over Facebook by promoting Google+, they were trying to feature companies that put a Google+ integration into their app. But they're constantly trying to do this. If they have a new camera API, they'll put a camera section on the homepage because you use the new camera APIs, because that allows them to build case studies and go and evangelize that. So give them something so that they can give you something in return. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about deep links. For almost everybody in this audience, it's a no-brainer. You should have a very clear deep link structure for your apps, for your products, for your content, for your listings, and have that indexed on Android. That will help you on the web. That will help you in web search, both desktop and mobile, and also help you as you do advertising. The best kind of mobile advertising is when the user knows what specific thing they're looking for. They can click on it, get to that item, do the transaction, and get out of it. And deep links enable that. So for almost everybody in this room, this is a no-brainer. What most people don't know is that Apple has actually been way ahead of Google at this and enabling you to do a lot of very interesting things in search, and announced this at last year's WWDC. So there's 3 APIs that they announced. The first one is for users that are active in your app. So in Let Go, maybe someone went and saw the bike that was shown yesterday. At that point, the first thing Let Go should do is go and index that onto the using NS user activity as a previously browsed item. Now, when someone on that phone, when that user goes to Spotlight and searches for bike, not only will they see the generic Siri results or the Google results that are there, but they'll also see the on-device search index results. So it will help help the app developer bring the user back into your app from the place that Apple is really driving to push for search there. The second one is for users that have installed your app but aren't using it as much. You can go and index all of your catalog, probably not all of it, but a lot of your catalog into the on-device index. What I highly suggest is indexing the content that is personalized to that user. So if you understand that user, what are the items they're likely to search for with the right indexed keywords, also things that are popular in that geographic area, and put that into the core Spotlight search. This will help bring users that have your app installed but are not coming back into your app organically to put that in there. And the third one is web markup, where you can truly mark up all of your products so that when someone in Safari searches for something on iPhone, even if they don't have your app installed, your deep search result, deep link can show up in their search. So Apple's opened up a lot of these APIs that hopefully some of you go in and implement, because it really can lead to explosive growth on iOS in a way that Android is not enabling today. And given the quality of users on iOS, definitely something that I highly suggest. So the next part. Today's the first time we're talking about SimilarWeb Audience. It's a new platform that we're launching. There's 3 parts of it, 2 of them launching today. The first one is called Portrait. I talked a lot about personalizing the experience in your app. You can understand the source of a new install, so you can know which ad creative they came from. But what if you could know a little bit more about the user? What if for every new user, you got a portrait that looked like this? This user is probably a 25 to 34-year-old female who is interested in running and fitness and a cooking enthusiast. If you just think about your products for a second. If you knew that level of detail about a brand new user who did not do any kind of login, no login with Facebook, no account creation, how would your product onboarding flow look like? Could it be better? Right? So on the right, I've got a visualization of what Pinterest could look like if they had this detail about a user. Some content about well-being, a pin about podcasts, and one about fitness. A personal anecdote, when I first installed Pinterest, a few days after I got engaged, my wife said, let's plan our wedding on there. I saw 36 ways to fix your hair in different ways, some nice leggings, and I took a screenshot of that and showed it to the Pinterest team and said, guys, you really need to understand that this isn't the content for me. And that's the problem a lot of apps have. They just don't understand their user. And the same data can not only be used for onboarding, but it can be used on an ongoing basis. It can be used to send personalized push notifications because 77% of your users are going to go away after 3 days, at least for now. So instead of sending them a generic push message because you don't know anything about them, you can send a push message targeted at a 45 to 50-year-old male who's interested in business and traveling, which is different than this user. Or in your email marketing, you can personalize it again. So that's what Portrait is for. And then when you go to the dashboard, you can see, you'll be able to see aggregate statistics about your audience. What's your breakdown of age, gender, location, personas, the top devices, top carriers. So some of the stuff in analytics, but also the top interests and brands that your users have affinity to. The second part of SimilarWeb Audience is called Churnlytics. It's to measure your uninstalls, and it also takes the power of Portrait and puts it on top of uninstalls. So what percentage of your users are uninstalling your app, and what do those uninstalling segments look like? Are they the 18 to 24-year-old females who care about fashion? Or are they the 34 to 55-year-old world travelers? And what does that mean for your product? Does that mean you improve the features, the onboarding for those segments? Or do you tell your growth and marketing teams, hey, stop getting me those users because they come in, they don't really use my app, and they uninstall me, which is actually hurting me from a search perspective. So you want to try and reduce your uninstalls by understanding the users that are uninstalling it. So all of this is available today at audience.similarweb.com, and it's going to be on the last slide. So now let's go to the last two parts of this before we open up to Q&A. We've talked a lot about Facebook Messenger. It's a very exciting new platform. I believe there's a talk later today about how one of the companies in the portfolio has actually used it. There's a couple of do's and don'ts that I'll give as a heads up as you think about it. The first one is that you should use it today to drive retention. Use it to drive re-engagement. Remind your users that they're doing something with your app. Maybe send them an update about a transaction that they did, a receipt. Also use it to make sure you're building a relationship with the user. And this is a mistake a lot of bots make, and actually a mistake that I think Google made when they built Google Now. How many folks here use Android? Okay, flip that around, iOS. Cool. So I'm going to give an example of Siri versus Google Now. How many folks have asked Siri a silly question like, hey Siri, do you have a boyfriend? Anybody in the room? Cool. How many people on Android have asked, hey Google Now, do you have a boyfriend? Way fewer. And that's because Google Now doesn't have a personality. It doesn't have a character. So when you think about bots, when you think about automating certain tasks, give your bot a personality or maybe a mascot. Give it a character. Because we as humans like to talk to other humans. It's a mistake a lot of bots make. The CNN bot just seems like a bunch of buttons today. It doesn't seem like someone I can converse with. The point of a messenger is to converse, not just to click buttons. So as you build your product, think about that. And there's a couple of very good examples of this. One is called Fin, and the other one's called Haptic. It's a company in India that are doing some very interesting stuff in this space. The other thing is try to make them as low latency as possible. When we send a message to our friends, the most annoying thing is when you know they've read it, but they don't respond, or they take forever to respond. So as you build your bots, think about how you can make it as natural as possible. Also, don't just send 5 messages in a row before someone responds to you and talks to you. That's what CNN does. The CNN bot's interesting, but it just responds to you with 5 messages in a row. And you kind of go, none of my friends would, if someone did that, I think they're crazy. Things not to do, it's not ready to replace your app or website quite yet. It's not very good for browse experiences. So for most people in the portfolio, a lot of the experience is browsing products. And bots aren't good for that today. They will change, they will adapt, because that's where commerce is. And of course, all of these platforms want to become very good for commerce. And the last thing is that as you're experimenting, pick a platform, pick Facebook, iterate on it. The backend will look the same, and then you can go launch on every other messenger out there. But turns out most of the connected world is on Facebook or WeChat. So I'd focus on those two, if any. And the last thing is Snapchat. It's a company that I think is super exciting, very focused on a specific demographic for now, but expanding. And most people in commerce aren't thinking about it quite enough yet. So I think it's a huge opportunity for all of us to build our brands and to really extend to new folks. So a couple of quick statistics about Snapchat. It's a uniquely young and very large user base, 100 million active users and growing, skewing younger, under 35 years of age. But they're doing a lot of very good things for what I call brand advertising. Not as much for direct marketing, but brand advertising is absolutely brilliant. When you go to a specific geographic location, you can put filters. When you go to open the camera, they have some augmented reality features where you can, based on how you change your face, they will put you inside an experience or change what you look like. Here's an example of a Gatorade lens ad that they put in, and it's right in the spirit of Gatorade. So think about your brands and how you could go reach this huge demographic as this plays. As this woman opens her mouth, she gets covered with a bunch of Gatorade. It's something that's purely done in technology, but in the markets that you're in, it could be so cool to see each and every one of your brands be shared by users. It's purely user generated. They think it's cool, and then they go and they share it with all of their friends. It's better than any other marketing that you can get because you can get a million brand ambassadors out there, and because it's so early in its life cycle, it's incredibly cheap right now. So it's a very good growth hack to go and spread your word as this platform is pretty early. So that's all I had. If any of you guys have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Do check out audience.similarweb.com, and I'll take any questions.
Okay. So, does anybody have any questions for Ankit, or perhaps both on apps and on dating, maybe?
First of all, great presentation. Thanks for that. Couple of questions. On one of the slides, you talked about paid distribution and organic distribution. So, wanted to get your thoughts on, does paid lead to more organic? Does it cannibalize for organic? That. And the second, assume you're doing about 100K installs per day, and you do everything that you talked about on Play Store optimization. What kind of upside do you think you can see? Is it like 10%, 15%, 50%? What is it?
All right, let's take the first one first. The kind of paid acquisition matters a lot as you're talking about organic growth. There's absolutely a big upside to doing paid, so you have to balance the two. If you get the right kind of users that are keeping your app, engaging with your app, not uninstalling you, and possibly even coming back and reviewing so that their friends and similar users interact with it, it can really start snowballing up for you. So no doubt about that. There is a very clear metric between those two. And the second question, just so I understand right, can you clarify what you mean by the optimization part there?
So all the stuff that you talked about in terms of Play Store optimization, getting yourself on the home page, optimizing whatever you put out there in terms of text and all of that for better discovery. Assume you do all of that, what kind of upside can you see on your current sort of installs trajectory?
In what specific metrics? I can't talk about, you will see a 10% upside, but if you do get featured depending on region, you can see 80 to 100K installs a day for the period that you are featured.
Okay.
And depending on where, there's many different segments where you can be featured. So the higher and to the left you are, it matters. The top is about 100 to 150K.
Okay. And the ranking within your categories. So if you're a shopping app and you're within the top 10, how much? I mean, just a sense.
It depends by categories. And some of the top free games can see hundreds of thousands of downloads. As you get deeper into the taxonomy, it's smaller. Productivity can probably see 10 to 15K. Retail, somewhere in the 10 to 30K a day.
I mean, the big thing is really to concentrate on the retention parts of your app, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to use your dating analogy, that's making sure that you take a shower every day, you brush your teeth, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
'Cause, you can pour on as much cologne as you really want, but might not get as much action if you just got chronic halitosis or something like that, right? Sorry about that. Come on.
As we try to diversify into newer verticals, to take our particular example, we are very focused on travel, intercity travel. but there's a huge scope in intracity transportation, to give you an example. And if we try to, diversify into doing that, I don't think we should be getting those verticals into the travel app, or perhaps trying to launch a new holidays-focused app. How do I leverage my existing user base, in the best possible way to gain traction with these new apps? Because
That's a great example, a great question. And I think one of the apps to look at as an example for this is actually Instagram. Very deep in the app, they are constantly adding hooks for their other apps. Because chances are the reason you're developing this new app is because you find that your users are asking for it. And they're asking for it because they hit a wall somewhere in your app that can't satisfy that specific need. And those are the places where you can put the hook for your new app. So Instagram, one of the things they do is when you're uploading a picture, they show you a camera roll, and they say, well, actually, do you want to make a collage of your different apps? And in which case, they have a hook to go install layout. So that's, you can, of course, put a banner like we talked about yesterday at the bottom of your app, but the best places to put it is where you know the user is feeling that pain, and linking them to grow your second app.
Sir.
Hi, I've got a question regarding the SimilarWeb audience service. How do you accumulate the data to create the profile for the users?
It's a great question. We actually accumulate it on the device itself. And so when you get a new user, the only piece of data that we're really looking at is what apps are installed on that device. We use that, build a model, and give it right back to you. So it takes about 20, 30 milliseconds. It's all on the fly. So if you've never seen the user, we can still do it for you.
Is this for iOS as well?
Today, it's just for Android. We're figuring out iOS in the coming months.